I would be bringing my wife and children back to the UK at this point, and the things that they're going to miss is, well, everything.
When the world least expected it, Prince Harry finally spoke, and the silence he shattered echoed far beyond palace walls.
This is not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's got to this point, but I've got to do something for my own mental health, for my wife's, and for Archie's as well, because I could see where this was headed.
Cameras rolled, headlines froze.
Every single time you have those headlines, we all get that there's a really big urgent message.
And every word landed heavier than the last as he addressed Meghan Markle directly.
I want to tell you a story that'll sort of give context to my being here and my work with UN Women.
What began as a simple statement quickly turned into a revelation that stunned supporters and critics alike, reshaping narratives built over years. Was this a moment of loyalty, regret, or something far more explosive, capable of changing how the world sees their story forever from this moment, when silence slipped and the truth spoke back?
Mothers and fathers who've lost a child to online harm. However, Newsweek reports it's now been passed over to another organisation called Parents Together.
It happened quietly, almost deliberately so. Last week, inside a private wellness summit in California dedicated to men's mental health, Prince Harry appeared relaxed, guarded, and unusually reflective. The setting was controlled, with few cameras, barely any press, and no expectation of headlines. This was meant to be a safe room, not a stage. As he spoke about well-being, identity, and fatherhood, one comment felt familiar, even gentle. He admitted he missed the UK, missed parts of his old life, and found it deeply sad that he may never be able to show his children his homeland. For a moment, it sounded like longing. Then the atmosphere shifted. One question cut through the calm with surgical precision. Had he ever felt like he lost himself in love? According to those in the room, Harry froze. His expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared. His shoulders tightened and the pause that followed felt heavy, unplanned, and raw. When he finally spoke, it wasn't polished or rehearsed. It sounded like a release. He said there was a time he no longer recognized the man in the mirror. He believed he was finding freedom, only to realize that freedom can sometimes look a lot like a cage. The silence afterward wasn't polite. It was stunned. Those words didn't drift. They detonated. Within hours, a clip from the summit spread across social media. Commentators replayed it frame by frame. Analysts dissected his tone. Psychologists debated the meaning. Royal watchers didn't hesitate. This wasn't abstract reflection or philosophical musing. It was specific, personal, and unmistakably loaded. Freedom can look like a cage wasn't a metaphor floating in the air. To many, it pointed in one clear direction. Behind palace walls and the gates of Montesato, sources say this moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of months of quiet pressure building without a single dramatic argument or public implosion. Insiders close to the Sussex Circle describe a slow realization forming in Harry's mind, piece by piece. During the collapse of their Netflix ambitions, those cracks reportedly widened.
Markle, who appear to have abandoned another project. The Parents Network was part of the couple's Archwell Foundation.
Meghan Markle pushed forward. More projects, more exposure, more control of the story. Harry, meanwhile, wanted the opposite. Peace, quiet, space. One source put it bluntly, he's exhausted, tired of being the spokesperson, the shield, the symbol, the man who always agrees. For years, Harry believed he was saving Meghan, protecting her from an institution he saw as rigid and suffocating. That belief gave his sacrifices meaning. But now, quietly and painfully, that idea has begun to reverse. He is starting to question whether he was ever the rescuer at all, or whether he was slowly disappearing in the process. As he watches his former world move forward, his brother settled. His father focused on legacy, the monarchy adapting without him. Harry seems suspended in an uncomfortable in-between, not fully free, not fully anchored. And that single moment in California may have revealed something far bigger than homesickness or regret, because once that door cracked open, it didn't look like it was meant to close again. And as Harry steps between freedom and confinement, will Harry reclaim himself? Or has the door he opened in California changed everything forever? Stay with us. The moment, the script, slipped out of his hands. The picture that emerges next is darker, heavier, and far more unsettling. No longer a working royal, yet not truly free either, Prince Harry now exists in a strange middle ground. He is surrounded by comfort, security, and wealth, but insiders say the isolation has grown sharper with time. According to people close to the situation, Meghan Markle sensed the shift almost immediately after the Wellness Summit moment went viral. What followed, they claim, was a tightening of control. Projects, public appearances, messaging, even casual conversations. Everything now reportedly passes through a filter designed to prevent surprises. The fear is simple but powerful. Harry speaking again without a script. And yet, that is exactly what happened. Within hours of the clip spreading online, sources describe chaos behind closed doors, urgent phone calls between public relations teams, frantic attempts to contain the narrative, messages fired off to event organizers asking how the footage leaked and whether more existed. But the response came too late. The internet had already labeled it Harry's slip of truth. For once, the words felt unguarded, not crafted, not approved. And something else stood out just as sharply. When the fallout began, Harry didn't rush to explain, clarify, or walk it back. He stayed quiet. And this time, the silence felt different. Since that moment, the pattern has become harder to dismiss. Fewer joint interviews, separate schedules, more solo appearances. When Harry does appear in public, those who know him well say there's a weight to him that wasn't there before. Friends describe him as withdrawn, deeply reflective, almost distant. One former military friend offered a detail that unsettled even those closest to him. Harry used to dominate the room, always laughing, always talking. Now he sits quietly, staring into his glass, as if his mind is somewhere far away. Then came the comment that stopped that friend cold. Harry admitted that sometimes he misses being invisible. Let that settle. A man who walked away from one of the most visible institutions on Earth in search of privacy, now wishing he could disappear altogether. That single sentence reframes everything. It suggests that the freedom he chased did not arrive the way it was promised. Instead, it came with contracts, cameras, expectations, and an unspoken demand to always perform. The palace may have been rigid, but life outside it came with its own kind of confinement. What makes this shift so striking is that it doesn't feel sudden. It feels cumulative. Years of being the spokesperson, years of absorbing criticism, years of defending decisions that may not have fully been his. The deals, the interviews, the constant global exposure were sold as liberation, yet they required him to remain visible, vocal, and aligned at all times. And now, as those closest to him quietly acknowledge, this was never just about one comment at a summit or one viral clip. That moment didn't create the fracture, it revealed it. The realization has been forming slowly, painfully, and once it surfaced in public, it became impossible to put back. Because when a man admits he wants to vanish, it raises a far more dangerous question. What happens next if he finally decides to stop playing the role entirely? And now, as Harry's silence deepens, the question lingers. Will he reclaim himself completely, or has the illusion already begun to shatter forever? Keep watching. When the mask cracked and the brand took priority. By now it was clear this was no accident, no careless slip of the tongue. What happened at the Wellness Summit was the moment something buried finally pushed its way into the open. What once looked like freedom now carried the weight of a polished cage, built from privilege, expectation, and quiet guilt. Insiders say Meghan Markle could see the shift as it unfolded, not in theory but in real time. Harry wasn't collapsing overnight. He was unraveling slowly, visibly, and in front of the world. What has unsettled those closest to the couple isn't simply tension inside the marriage. Relationships strain all the time. What alarms them is where the priorities appear to be landing. According to multiple sources, the focus right now is not repairing what's breaking between two people. It's protecting what's been built around them. The brand, the image, the carefully maintained story. Because this version of Harry, the honest one, the reflective one, the man speaking without approval, is not just emotionally risky. He's strategically dangerous. One Hollywood insider put it bluntly: if Harry keeps talking like this, the illusion collapses. And once that illusion cracks, it can't be reconstructed. That's the fear quietly driving everything behind the scenes. Because Harry is no longer just sharing emotions. He's revealing patterns, control, the slow erosion of identity, the hidden cost of love when it becomes entangled with power, cameras, and contracts. Each sentence now feels loaded. Each pause feels deliberate, like a man checking whether he's still allowed to exist outside the role he's been given. And the most unsettling part is where this is happening. Not in a private diary, not in therapy, but in public, where nothing can be pulled back once it lands. Every time Harry speaks, it sounds less like reflection and more like a test, a quiet experiment to see how far he can go before the walls close in again. Judging by what followed, the answer from Montecito was immediate and unforgiving. If Harry's confession at the California Wellness Summit sent shockwaves through the Sussex world, Meghan's reaction turned those tremors into something far more destructive. Within minutes of the clip going viral, it exploded across platforms. Millions of views, endless replays, comment sections filling faster than any team could contain. The phrase, "freedom can look like a cage," took on a life of its own, repeated, dissected, and weaponized. Insiders say Meghan went straight into crisis mode. Phones rang without pause. Advisors scrambled. Messages were fired off in every direction. One source described the atmosphere inside the Montecito mansion as pure chaos. Meghan pacing across marble floors, barefoot, phone locked in her hand, voice raised, instructions coming fast and sharp. "Get it taken down! Call everyone! Stop this now!" But there was nothing left to stop, because those words were already out there, burned into the internet's memory. No retraction could erase them. No clarification could soften them. No carefully crafted joint statement could put them back in the bottle. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted. The issue was no longer what Harry said. It was the realization that he said it at all, and that once a man starts speaking without permission, silence becomes impossible to restore. Now, because those words are out forever, do you think Harry will keep breaking silence? Or will the story finally spiral beyond control? The narrative slipped, and the truth refused to apologize. For years, Meghan Markle had managed the public story with near-perfect precision. Every appearance was measured. Every quote was shaped. Every camera angle told a specific version of who they were and why they left. Control wasn't just a strategy, it was survival. But this time, the script slipped out of her hands, and according to people close to the couple, that loss of control cut deeper than anything before it. Insiders say Meghan confronted Harry the moment he returned home. There was no easing into it, no careful language. What followed was not a disagreement or a tense discussion. It was, by all accounts, one of the most explosive confrontations they had ever had. Voices were raised. Accusations flew. Meghan reportedly told Harry he had betrayed her, that his words had made her look manipulative, calculated, and cold. She accused him of handing the tabloids exactly what they had always wanted, of turning her into the villain in a story she had spent years trying to protect. One source claims she told him flatly that he had destroyed everything they worked for, that a single moment of honesty had undone years of careful positioning. According to those familiar with the exchange, Harry listened, but something was different this time. He didn't shrink. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to smooth it over. For the first time in years, he didn't step back. Instead, he responded with 6 words that changed the tone of the room entirely. "I didn't destroy anything. I just told the truth. Nothing more." Insiders say the silence that followed was immediate and heavy, the kind that feels louder than shouting. Then Meghan stormed out, slamming the door so hard it reportedly shook the chandelier. But the real explosion wasn't confined to that house. It was already spreading far beyond it. Online, the reaction was instant and unforgiving. Royal watchers slowed the footage down, frame by frame. TikTok analysts dissected his posture, his pauses, and the way his voice softened at certain moments. YouTube channels rushed out breakdowns within hours. Twitter threads stretched endlessly, all circling the same conclusion. Harry wasn't performing anymore. He was cracking. Even the British press, the very force Harry had spent years battling, sensed an opening. Morning headlines were sharp and relentless. Cryptic confession, trouble in paradise, freedom or regret. The Sussex fairy tale unravels. The tone wasn't speculative, it was surgical. And yet, amid the chaos, something unexpected surfaced. According to a close friend, Harry didn't look angry in the aftermath. He looked lighter, almost relieved, as if saying the words out loud, even partially, had lifted a weight he'd been carrying for years. That friend described it as watching a man finally admit, if only to himself, that this wasn't the life he believed he was choosing back then, that the promise of freedom came bundled with conditions he didn't fully see at the time. And once that realization settles in, it doesn't stay quiet for long. Because when someone stops apologizing for their truth, the story doesn't reset. It shifts. And the people who built everything around the old version are forced to decide what matters more, protecting the image or confronting what happens when the man at the center no longer agrees to play along. But as the realization settles in, it doesn't stay quiet for long. So, will Harry finally break free, or will the old story crush him? Stay glued. When the spin failed, and silence spoke louder. Meghan Markle was not prepared to let Harry's words settle on their own. According to people familiar with the aftermath, she moved quickly, decisively, and with purpose. Within hours, full-scale damage control was underway. Favors were called in. Trusted journalists were contacted. Carefully shaped explanations were quietly fed to select outlets. The response was fast, polished, and relentless. Almost immediately, familiar headlines began to appear. Harry is fragile. Harry is exhausted. Harry was misunderstood. Harry didn't mean it that way. Each version carried the same message. Reinterpret the moment, soften its meaning, redirect the focus. But this time, the strategy struggled to land. The clip didn't need translation. It didn't rely on context or framing. It was raw, clear, and deeply personal. Viewers didn't hear confusion. They heard clarity. And as Meghan's team pushed the idea that the couple was stronger than ever, the internet reacted with something they couldn't control: pushback. Comment sections filled at a pace no publicist could manage, repeating the same blunt conclusions. He looks miserable. She's protecting herself, not him. This isn't love, it's control. The more the narrative was polished, the more unnatural it appeared. Each attempt to smooth the story only drew sharper attention to what felt off, because behind closed doors, sources say the tension never lifted. It settled in, thick, constant, unavoidable. The atmosphere inside their home reportedly feels strained, not explosive, but heavy in a way that doesn't dissipate. Harry, once known as the loudest presence in any room, has changed. Friends say the shift is impossible to miss. He isn't angry. He isn't dramatic. He's quiet, withdrawn, thoughtful in a way that feels new and unsettling. That silence, those close to him believe, may be the most dangerous development of all. Because anger burns out. Silence signals reflection. And once someone begins to truly wake up, they rarely return to sleep. Those who still have access to him describe long stretches of solitude. Harry spends evenings alone, wandering the garden late at night when the house is quiet, sitting motionless by the fireplace, staring into nothing, as if replaying years of decisions he once believed were certain. There are no outbursts, no public scenes, just distance. And distance, in this situation, carries weight. What makes this moment so unsettling is how it aligns with everything that came before it. The summit confession, the refusal to apologize, the 6-word response that changed the dynamic inside the house. Together, they form a pattern that's hard to dismiss. This isn't a man spiraling, it's a man reassessing. And reassessment threatens systems built on consistency and control. Meanwhile, the media machine continues to grind forward. New articles appear daily, each attempting to redirect attention, to frame the story as temporary strain or misinterpreted emotion. But the audience isn't moving on. If anything, they're watching more closely, listening for what Harry says next, and perhaps more importantly, for what he doesn't say. Because something has shifted beneath the surface, not loudly, not violently, but enough to be felt. And as the silence around Harry grows deeper, those closest to the situation understand the risk, not of another viral moment, but of a man quietly realizing that the life he's living no longer feels like his own, and that realization, once fully formed, rarely stays contained. And now, will Harry reclaim his life, or will the silence signal a storm no one saw coming? Stay tuned. The Quiet Break, from the world that chose for him. According to people close to Prince Harry, a subtle but deeply telling shift has been unfolding behind the scenes. He has stopped returning calls from several of Meghan Markle's Hollywood contacts, people who once formed the backbone of their California social world. Invitations go unanswered. Messages sit unread. The glamorous circle that once defined their new life has slowly faded into the background, and insiders are clear about one thing. This distance is not accidental. It is deliberate. One source described the realization that triggered it as sudden and overwhelming. Harry finally saw how isolated he had become. No family nearby. No childhood friends dropping by. No familiar voices grounding him in daily life. For years, the people who knew him before the titles, before the trauma, before the cameras, had vanished from his routine. In their place stood a carefully curated world of producers, strategists, and social climbers, all orbiting one central influence. According to those who know him, it dawned on Harry that the only consistent voice shaping his decisions for a very long time had not been his own. That understanding, sources say, hit like a tidal wave. Because once the illusion cracks, once you begin to question what is real and what has been shaped for you, there is no going back. Every memory gets re-examined. Every choice feels heavier. And that's when Harry did something almost no one saw coming. Instead of doubling down on public statements or attempting to control the narrative, he went quiet. Then he reached backward, not to the tabloids, not to sympathetic journalists, not to powerful figures who could spin the story in his favor. He reached out to people from his past, old army friends who had known him without ceremony or expectation. A former palisade who had always looked out for him, even when it wasn't convenient. These were not dramatic calls. There were no ultimatums, no plans being announced. Insiders say the conversations were simple, cautious, and deeply personal. They weren't about reconciliation with institutions or repairing public image. They were about grounding, about remembering who he was before his life became a performance, before contracts, deals, and global attention dictated his every move, before every word had to pass through layers of approval. Those close to him say these conversations have changed something fundamental. Harry isn't seeking advice on what to do next. He's asking questions about who he used to be, about what mattered before loyalty became public and love became strategic, about whether the version of himself that existed before all of this still has a place in his future. And that is what makes this moment so dangerous to the structure around him. Not anger, not rebellion, reflection. Reflection breaks systems far more quietly and far more completely. Friends describe Harry as calm, but alert, as if he's slowly piecing together a truth he had avoided for years. The isolation he once accepted as the cost of freedom now feels like a warning sign he ignored for too long. As he steps further away from the life that was chosen for him and inches closer to the one he remembers, the silence around him grows more deliberate. Fewer voices, fewer influences, fewer distractions. And for the first time since leaving the UK, those closest to him believe Harry is no longer asking how to survive this life, but whether it was ever truly his to begin with. So what did Harry discover in the silence of his own life? And how far will he go to reclaim the identity that was quietly taken from him? When the spotlight shifted and the silence turned cold. At the same time, Harry was pulling inward. Those close to Meghan Markle say she was beginning to unravel. Public sentiment, once firmly on her side, was changing fast. The momentum that once surrounded their media deals slowed to a crawl. Netflix's enthusiasm cooled. Spotify was already gone. Invitations that used to arrive effortlessly began to dry up, and the one certainty she believed would never waver, Harry's absolute, unquestioning loyalty, no longer felt secure. Insiders say that uncertainty triggered what they describe as a counteroffensive. Meghan began planning a glossy, high-profile magazine feature meant to reset the narrative yet again. The aim was familiar but urgent: reframe herself as misunderstood, unfairly targeted, a woman battered by misogyny and misinformation. In the past, that approach worked. This time, it didn't. Hollywood didn't rush to her defense. Former allies stayed quiet. Fashion editors hesitated. Talk show hosts looked elsewhere. Even A-list friends, once reliable, kept their distance. The sympathy that once wrapped around Meghan like armor had thinned into something far colder: silence. And within that silence, sources say the strain finally began to show. One staff member claims they overheard Meghan late one night on a phone call, her voice breaking as she said she had given up everything for Harry. Everything, only to now feel painted as the villain. It was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. But here is the truth no one around them was willing to say out loud. Harry wasn't trying to destroy her. He was trying to find himself. That contrast became painfully clear the very same week. Harry attended a private veterans gathering in Santa Barbara. No cameras, no press, no Meghan. Just a quiet room filled with people who knew him long before the royal exit, before the documentaries, before California turned his life into a carefully staged version of freedom. Witnesses say the atmosphere was heavy but supportive. At one point, Harry became openly emotional, tears visible as he spoke. No, he told the group something that stayed with everyone in the room. You don't realize how lost you are until someone takes the compass away. Then, after a pause, he added quietly that he thought he had been doing the right thing. But somewhere along the way, he stopped being himself. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was honest in a way few people had ever seen from him. That moment moved quickly through the veteran community, not as gossip, but as concern. The vulnerability of a man who had spent years under relentless scrutiny was finally breaking through. And this is where everything began to circle back on itself. Shortly afterward, a journalist with deep royal connections dropped what many now see as the real turning point. Behind the scenes, Harry had been quietly working with a publisher on a new personal project. One, Meghan did not approve. This wasn't another documentary. It wasn't a headline-driven memoir. It was something far more unsettling. A raw, deeply personal work centered on his identity, not their shared narrative. According to people familiar with early excerpts, the project is shockingly direct. No filters, no spin, no shared talking points. It explores how love, loyalty, and sacrifice can slowly erase who you are without you even noticing. For the first time, Harry isn't telling a story shaped by strategy or brand protection. He's telling his own story. And that, insiders say, terrifies Meghan more than any headline ever could. Because once the man she tried to guide, manage, and protect starts speaking for himself, the illusion doesn't bend. It breaks. The brand fractures. The fairy tale dissolves. And as Harry grows quieter, more deliberate, and more resolved, those watching closely can feel it building toward a moment where he no longer tries to hold it together at all. So, what do you think Harry will do now that he's finally speaking his own truth? Will the Sussex story survive? Or is the fairy tale finally unraveling? We'd love your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.